talking real loud, spreading on lies, trying to bring me down. Enemies lurking, but I won't back away. Got a vision in my mind, I'm here to stay. Got my crew beside me, we rise like a tide. When the storm gets rough, we ain't gonna hide. Propaganda swirling, but it won't touch me. Only love around us, how it's gonna be. Keep moving forward, never looking back. The truth's in the power, it's an unstoppable track. In the city lights where dreams collide, we hustle through the night, fire in our stride. Whispers in the dark can't dim my glow. With rhythm in my soul, I'm ready for the show. We break the chains, rewrite the rules in this concrete jungle where nobody's fools. Unity sings louder than the lies they scheme. In the heart of the struggle, we dare to dream. Keep moving forward, never looking back. The truth's in the power, it's an unstoppable track.
Another Queen Ahmadiyyah production.
Haze on the corner, they talking real loud, spreading on lies, trying to bring me down. Enemies lurking, but I won't back away. Got a vision in my mind, I'm here to stay. Got my crew beside me, we rise like a tide. When the storm gets rough, we ain't gonna hide. Propaganda swirling, but it won't touch me. Only love around us, how it's gonna be. Keep moving forward, never looking back. The truth's in the power, it's an unstoppable track. In the city lights where dreams collide, we hustle through the night, fire in our stride. Whispers in the dark can't dim my glow. With rhythm in my soul, I'm ready for the show. We break the chains, rewrite the rules in this concrete jungle where nobody's fools. Unity sings louder than the lies they scheme. In the heart of the struggle, we dare to dream. Keep moving forward, never looking back. The truth's in the power, it's an unstoppable track. Haze on the corner, they talking real loud, spreading on lies, trying to bring me down. Enemies lurking, but I won't back away. Got a vision in my mind, I'm here to stay. Got my crew beside me, we rise like a tide. When the storm gets rough, we ain't gonna hide. Propaganda swirling, but it won't touch me. Only love around us, how it's gonna be. Keep moving forward, never looking back. The truth's in the power, it's an unstoppable track. In the city lights where dreams.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in once again to the original Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur show. I'm your host, Queen Ahmadiyyah Shakur, and this is your morning wake-up call. So as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Be sure to click that notification bell and click the word all so you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live. Okay, so excuse me, before we get into it, let's have a brief word from my sponsor at 12 Tribes. Y'all know I have to keep the lights on.
Do not buy 12 Tribes on Earth hair growth oil and hair magic elixir unless you want super healthy, gorgeous hair that grows. They have a whole line of amazing hair growth products, including hair growth leave-in conditioner spray, hair growth shampoo, hair growth spray, and hair growth butter. I'm starting to sense a theme here. They include quality natural ingredients. They smell amazing, and you can see the results for yourself. So if you're looking for healthy hair growth for your natural or relaxed hair, try 12 Tribes on Earth today.
All right, so don't forget you can purchase 12 Tribes hair oil at Etsy.com. Just look for Lisa Crafts, and you can also find it at Walmart.com. Okay, so before we get started, excuse me, before we get started, I'm sorry, I'm having throat issues. Okay, I'm trying to drink some warm tea. But so anyway, before we get started, let's talk about these floods. Okay, the flooding that's going on in New York. I'm going to go to an update. Like, sub, everyone, please like and share. Thank you in advance. Hold on. I'll go to that later. Let's see who is in here, first of all. Let me put on my glasses. Jeff ATL is in the house. Pearly, okay. Panther Strike. Excuse me. So how do you all like this thing where it's changing your names, okay, from what your regular name was? I don't like it. I can tell you that right now. I don't like it because some of you guys, I can't even recognize who you are. All right, Nessa G, Miss Sheila Panther Strikes in the house. Angela Griffin is here. Okay. Angela says, sorry, but this is not right. What's being done to Diddy? All these people are working together to bring Diddy down, and it has nothing to do with the Mann Act, in my opinion. Well, we're going to get into it, beloved. Okay. Hey, Cyrus. Panther Strike said, I don't like it, Queen. Honey, I don't either. Okay, Pro said, I don't like it either, Queen. All right. So D. Judah is here. Okay, so hey, Claudette. Everyone hit that like button. Please like and share. Thank you in advance. Okay, what's really going on, you guys? What is really going on? So, you know, the feds right now, they're doing some of everything to keep Diddy locked up, and including lying. Okay, including lying. Okay, that's what they're doing. Now, we're going to get into it because they mentioned a couple of cases in their opposition, you know, to the defense's motion for bail. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But hold on. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen so we can check out this update.
Queens, you have gone from flooded place to flooded place today, Stacey.
Yeah, Bill, knee deep. You know, the rain may have stopped, but the commuting nightmare certainly hasn't. We are here at the Bayside LIRR station, the crux of the problem. You see it right behind me here. These tracks are just simply flooded out. It has been like this for hours now, and it has been affecting the Port Washington train line. Take a look at these pictures. This is a picture of part of the problem as well. A train that was actually stuck here, has been stuck here for hours. They've been working on getting it out and getting the people off the train, which has now finally happened. We spoke to a witness. Here's how he described what occurred.
Like 60 passengers so far just got off the train.
They must have had a heck of a commute home.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a very wet one.
How long were they sitting there waiting to get off the train?
Possibly like 3 hours. Yeah. They don't call it Bayside for nothing, so as you can clearly see, it has a new meaning to it.
I'll say. And if you take a look here over on the Clearview Expressway, just a couple of hours ago, that was flooded out, cars submerged, a white tractor trailer partially submerged, rescues that took place, but fortunately no one was injured. We can tell you the Clearview has since reopened. We can also tell you there were also problems on the Cross Island Expressway. And so Bayside, a concentrated area back here live now where you are looking at the crux of the problem for hours, the tracks simply flooded out here at the Bayside LIRR. Obviously, if you are standing at Penn Station right now trying to get back out to Long Island, waiting for this flood to dry up is pretty much like watching paint dry up. But luckily, no one was hurt. We are live in Bayside. I'm Stacey Sager, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And that's what it takes for it to dry up. They're not going to try to get it out of there. They're going to dry it up, right? Wow. Okay.
Well, you know, there is a diesel. There's a diesel right here, and we are being told that they're going to try to pull it out of here or push it out of here. They have to remove this train so things can start moving again.
There you go. Okay, Tracy, thank you for that, Stacey. I mean, sorry about that. Now to the flooding in New Jersey. Lots to be sure there. New Jersey reporter Tony Yates right now in English Town for us. Tony.
Yeah, Bill, you know, I've been out for a couple of hours in all of this rain with photojournalist Mike Humphreys. And what we're really seeing is a lot of ponding on roads. And of course, it's causing problems because right now, you know, we're in the middle of rush hour in so many areas. But this is pretty much what we're seeing. We're on the border of Englishtown and Monroe Township. And you see all of this flooding on the side of the road at this point. But some of the cars, you know, as they come through, it's splashing really big because a lot of that ponding is going way out into those lanes. And as we drive around, you know, when we hear some of these trouble spots, we get there and we see crews who are clearing a lot of stuff, leaves, cans, debris from the grates at the sewer drains. And once they start getting that cleared out, then a lot of that ponding is just dissipating and they're able to open up lanes that they had closed before. Now, earlier, we want to show you that video. We were up in Woodbridge Township where the Woodbridge Center Drive had been closed. Like, in one direction, the far right lane was closed because there was a lot of flooding there. In fact, there were about 4 or 5 cars that were stuck in that mess. We spoke to a man, Chris, who showed us some of the pictures of the flooding that they were dealing with there. He said he and his family was stuck in it. This is what they told us.
The waters were raging. I'll tell you that much. We got stuck. It came out of nowhere. But this little girl here had to swim out. She's all wet now. We're all wet. But luckily we know somebody over here. So we were able, we got towed and now we're sitting over here. But it was, I'm telling you, it was about 5 feet.
Okay, so as you're driving around this evening, you just have to be aware of some of this ponding that's happening because it is very thick in some areas. And hats off to Woodbridge Township. They had their police and emergency crews out. As soon as they had those problems, they got those ponding issues settled and traffic flowing again, but this will still be an issue.
Okay, so you all see that. So, you know, for everybody that's in New York and New Jersey, stay safe, okay? Because it's wet out there. With that all being said, I'm going to go to this other report real quick because I just want you all to see some of the visuals. I'm glad I'm not in New York right now. I'll say that much.
Where commuters are just struggling to make their way home. That video just surprising to see, Jess.
That's right, Natasha and Bianca. Just as we were coming on the air, finally the Clearview Expressway opened up in both directions. But I have to tell you, I'm going to step out of the way so you can see here that traffic is moving slowly. These drivers were stuck in this traffic for about 2 hours, if not more. And the scene here is nothing compared to what happened at around 3 o'clock. Let's look at this video here from Citizen App. You can see rescue crews on scene, cars, and even this white big truck submerged in water. You can see there a man on top of the roof of his car waiting to be rescued. I was told that that gentleman got out of the car, then went back in his car, and that's when firefighters told him absolutely not, get out and get on top of the car, meaning get on the roof until he was rescued. The expressway was closed down in both directions, and when we got here, I want to show you video. This video is when we arrived on scene, which is about 4:15, 4:30, and by then the water had receded. Still, that big white truck was here in the middle of the road waiting to be towed along with another sedan. The issue here that we saw too was that there was so much debris clouding, you know, over the drains here, covering the drains, so the water could not get by. We spoke to one man who tells us that this happened so quickly, 5 minutes, he says. He says, if you were driving on this road and you said, hey, let me try to get by, you just got stuck. And that's what happened to these drivers. Go ahead and take a listen to what he told me he saw once he arrived here on scene.
Yeah, water was out of control. The tractor trailer was all the way up to the wheels. You couldn't see the wheels. This white BMW was almost submerged. And the water was just all over the place.
And here's video over at Bell Boulevard in Bayside, Queens. So much flooding there. You see the White Castle. This is DOT video. We actually called into White Castle, and the employees told us over the phone that they were their store, their shop was submerged in water, flooding inside that White Castle as well. And now let's take you to the Cross Island and Northern Boulevard, where you see their cars having a hard time getting by. But here, back live to Bayside by the Clearview Expressway. Traffic now moving in both directions. The expressway has
Okay, that's pretty bad right there. Okay, why were those people out driving around? You all said there were warnings. Okay, VM said, unfortunately, extreme weather is becoming an issue everywhere. Okay, it certainly seems to be that way. All right. This weather is bipolar. So anyway, I would have been at home, honey. You couldn't have had me out there in that weather, and especially in Georgia, because people in Atlanta drive like complete idiots. That's what they do. They drive like complete idiots when it's raining. And I just don't know why. Okay. I don't know why. But anyway, let's get into this paperwork. Because I actually have a Zoom appointment at 10:45. So let's get into it. I don't want to tarry. Okay. I want to try to get through this. It's like 11 pages. Now, this, hold on. Before I get into that, hold on. Let me pull up something else real quick. The feds are claiming that nothing has changed, and that Diddy has not shown or proven that he's going to do anything differently than what he's always done. That's basically what they're saying. And if you ask me, from just reading through some of the paperwork, I didn't read through all of it yet, but they just seem to be petty and making up a bunch of asinine excuses and even telling lies, in my opinion. Okay. So prosecutors said they now expect music mogul Sean Diddy Combs could face a prison sentence substantially higher than the 4 to 5 years they once thought that he was likely to face after his conviction on 2 restitution-related charges. Okay, let's see how this is going to fly. So they say they made the observation late Thursday in a Manhattan federal court written submission in which they also opposed Combs' request this week to be released on $50 million bail while he awaits an October 3rd sentencing. So in early July, Combs was acquitted of racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking charges, carrying potential life prison terms, but was convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution for arranging for girlfriends and male workers to travel to engage in sexual encounters that he filmed. Now, each restitution-related charge carries a potential maximum 10 years in prison. Prosecutors said after the verdict, they thought that federal sentencing guidelines meant to prevent wide disparities in sentencing for the same crimes would likely call for a prison term of 4 to 5 years. But they said on Thursday, they believe the guidelines range will be substantially higher. Y'all hear this? Okay, raising the risk that Combs will flee. See how they're just pulling stuff out of their ass? I just want y'all to pay attention. So now all of a sudden, when Diddy asked for bail, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, he's possibly going to get a whole lot more than 4 or 5 years. So he just might try to flee. These people are so damn stupid. This is all asinine excuses. I want you all to pay attention. Now, they can give Mike Jeffries bail. Okay? Same charges as Diddy, just about. Okay? They claim that he was tampering with witnesses also. So anyway, that man is not even going to trial. Just keep that in mind. And by the way, for anybody thinking, because I know some Black people, and I'm not going to talk about the other people because we expect other people to be against Diddy, but some of y'all Black people who've been saying stuff like, oh, well, he did beat Cassie. He did this, he did that. There are murderers out on bail. You don't think that just perhaps maybe the families of the victims that the murderers in fact killed or accused of killing, you don't think they might be fearful? But the murderers still get to go home until their trial date. Okay, so there's that. But let me continue. I'm just saying because some people just don't make any sense. Judge Iron Subramanian will have wide latitude in determining a sentence and can choose to ignore the guidelines, which are not mandatory. Combs' attorneys have said they believe the guidelines, if properly calculated, will call for a 21 to 27 years in prison. That's what they do call for. Remember I told you all that? Okay, remember I told you all that because I had looked it up weeks ago. Now, on the day of the verdict, prosecutors won a bail fight after defense lawyer Mark Agnifilo argued Combs should be freed immediately on bail. Subramanian denied the defense request, saying Combs had not met the burden of showing by clear and convincing evidence a lack of danger to any person or the community. But Agnifilo said, now he renews the request. So in doing so, Tuesday, Agnifilo cited other cases he said were comparable to Combs' conviction in which defendants were granted bail. And he cited severe conditions at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where Combs had been since his September arrest. Here's the thing. So apparently, at some point, Diddy's attorneys, I'm not sure which one, we'll get into that when I start reading through the paperwork, but apparently, from what I gathered, they previously acted as though the MDC was not so bad or something. And so now the prosecution's trying to bring that back up. Okay, like using their own words against him, like they did when Diddy was trying to get bail on the day that he was acquitted of the 3 serious or more serious charges. He also said Combs was being treated unfairly for engaging in a swingers lifestyle in which he and his girlfriend sometimes invited male S workers to join them in multi-day marathon S performances. Prosecutors said in their filing Thursday that Combs' conviction on the restitution-related counts carried a mandatory requirement that he remain in jail prior to sentencing, unless he could prove exceptional circumstances, which they said he cannot. So why are these other people who had Mann Act violations and convictions, why did these people get bail if that's the case? See, it's because they pick and choose. So they said he should also remain in prison as a danger to the community, a claim that Agnifilo disputed in his papers. And could everybody please stop calling this damn man Agnifilo? The man's name is Agnifilo. Now, you have to be pretty dumb, in my opinion. If you've heard the man say his name, you've heard them say it, especially if you were following the trial, you're still calling that man something that isn't his name. That's just disrespectful and stupid, in my opinion. Let me continue. Prosecutors also said conditions at the federal lockup had improved considerably before Combs was arrested. A federal judge in January of 2024 had blasted conditions at the jail, including its extensive lockdowns and inadequate medical care. Prosecutors said they cited cases by Agnifilo in which other defendants received bail. They were not comparable crimes to Combs's, who was convicted of carrying out, particularly because of his propensity for violence. They said the defendant's extensive history of violence and his continued attempt to minimize his recent violent conduct demonstrates his dangerousness and that he is not amenable to supervision, they wrote. Do y'all hear this? Like, so nobody can tell him nothing. Here's how you know that's all bad BS and lies. They're basically trying to say that he's so darn dangerous that he's not amenable to supervision. You know, that's interesting because he's in jail right now, and he has been since September of 2024. And so while he's been in jail, he has been supervised. There's rules and guidelines that you have to follow, else you get put in solitary confinement or other punishments and consequences. Has Diddy broken the rules? Have they not been able to contain him? Have they not been able to supervise him? I think they have, because we haven't heard anything crazy, right? I mean, they're just acting like he's some madman who can't be trusted to do the right thing. Now, the defendant utterly fails to establish by clear and convincing evidence as required that he does not pose a danger to the community. Well, here's the thing. Prior to his arrest, was he doing anything in the community that they would deem as dangerous? Now, I know they said that he was tampering with witnesses, but didn't Kalina, in fact, did she say anything about being threatened or whatever? Yeah, I don't think she did. Okay. And at this point, I don't believe anything the prosecution says unless they provide proof and receipts. Okay. So anyway, with that all been said, I find it all interesting. So let's get into the paperwork. And they keep bringing up the violence. And I want you all to really, really pay attention to that because we know Diddy's violent. His own attorneys agreed that he was violent. Okay, we all saw the video. This is why that's all that the prosecution keeps talking about. You know why that's all they keep talking about? Because that's all they have to talk about. You see, they're not making the argument that, oh, if we let him out on bail, he'll start trafficking people again, or he'll start doing all these freak offs. They're not talking about that. They keep bringing up the violence. Okay. Has he been violent in jail? You see, people who are so violent that they can't contain or control themselves or their violence, they'll be violent with anyone at any time. If they're that unpredictable and not able to be supervised, has he been getting into fights in jail? Has he been a model inmate? This is what the judge needs to look at. You see, the judge needs to look at the history of what Diddy's been doing from day one since he's been in jail up until now. He doesn't need to keep going way back to that old arse video of him beating the hell out of Cassie, which was egregious. But that video is over a decade old. Okay, and he was not convicted, okay, of that video. He was not convicted of violence. And you know why? Because some of y'all could say, well, that video showed that he was violent and, you know, it was used because of the RICO, but he didn't get convicted of the RICO. And they were using that video to prove the RICO and the S trafficking, which entails force, fraud, or coercion. And since he didn't get convicted of the S trafficking, then it's safe to say that they didn't believe that he committed force, fraud, or coercion. So if the jurors if the jurors unanimously felt like he didn't do it, then who are they, the prosecution that is, and the judge, to say otherwise? See, they keep trying to use that, like I said, because that's all they have. Okay. Now they're trying to twist the law to benefit the narrative that they're out here pushing. Now, I'll guarantee you, if Diddy was somebody who didn't look like me, they wouldn't be having all this smoke. Okay? Please pay attention. They wouldn't be having all this smoke. So anyway, let's get into it. Likes up, everyone. Please like and share. Hold on, beloveds. I don't know why this thing does this. Hold on, you guys. I think I'm going to have to go out and come back in. I'm going to have to try to, let me see how I'm going to do this. I'm having a problem again. I don't know what's going on with StreamYard, but this is the second time this week I've had to deal with this. Hold on. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to have to refresh this and see if I can get this thing acting right. Hold on. Okay, now let me see if this is going to work this time. There we go. Okay. Now let me share my screen again. Okay, so now we're going to go over these documents. And like I said, they referenced a couple of cases, and we'll talk about those as well. Okay, so hold on, one more thing. I'm checking on this software real quick. Hold on. All right, it's almost done, guys. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's get into it. Don't forget to hit that like button. Aaron Spirit says Diddy has not been accused of unaliving anyone. Exactly. Okay, exactly. And so with that all been said, let's get into it. So here's what they say. Now, this was filed on yesterday. Oh, and by the way, guys, today it's August the 1st. It's supposed to be the start of the boycott. Supposed to be the start of that boycott. For those of you who said you were going to boycott, honey, y'all need to sit down. Okay, so dear Judge Subramanian, despite this court's clear ruling that the defendant must be detained pending sentencing following his conviction on 2 felony counts, the defendant moves again for bail. Now, as the court correctly found after written and oral submissions by the parties on July the 2nd of 2025, the defendant's detention pending sentencing is mandatory, they say. So his detention is mandatory? There are no exceptional circumstances justifying his release, and even if there were, the defendant cannot demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence that he is not a danger to the community. Further, following the court's ambiguous ruling, the defendant now seeks relief without even attempting to demonstrate a reason for consideration. Well, I would think, now this is what I want you guys to pay attention to. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they say he's not trying to demonstrate clear and convincing evidence that he's not a danger to the community, didn't his attorney, because I played the video for you all the other day, where Mark Agnifilo did an interview with Court TV, and he talked about how Diddy was in these, he was having counseling for the violence and for the illegal substances that he has a problem with, and that counselors were coming to the jail to visit with him, that they were not using any resources from inside the jail because they really don't have adequate resources there, because it's basically just a holding place before you're sent to prison if after conviction. So they didn't think that was adequate. So they had their own counselors that they hired to come in to work with Diddy. So doesn't that seem like he's trying to show that he's trying to do better? I mean, that's just how I would take it. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments. Now, because the defendant's motion fails to demonstrate any of the required showings, he fails to carry his burden, and the motion should be swiftly rejected, they say. They say, number one, The defendant has presented no reason for the court to reconsider its detention ruling. The defendant asked the court to reconsider its July 2nd, 2025 ruling that the defendant must be detained pending trial. First of all, pending trial, don't they mean pending sentencing? The trial is over. Did they proofread this? Okay, let's just pay attention. Kind of inadequate, don't you think? But let me continue. But fails to even address the proper standard for a motion for reconsideration, let alone meet it. This court properly denied the defendant's request for bail on July the 2nd, 2025, and the defendant has failed to present any reason for the court to consider or reconsider its ruling. The court should deny the defendant's motion on that basis alone, they say. Do y'all hear this bullshit? Do y'all hear this? I want y'all to pay attention. And then Nessa G said, dangerous for being a voyeur, because that's what they have him locked up for. Exactly. They have this man locked up for watching freaky deaky stuff. If that's the case, they need to come lock half of y'all's behinds up, because I know y'all watch corn. I know some of y'all probably watch corn. Now, I don't watch it, but I'm saying I'm pretty sure some of you all do. Okay? I can tell by your names, mind you. Aaron Spirit said, you are correct, Queen. They are ignoring this. Exactly, beloved. Corn watchers in the chat, put a 1. Corn watchers in the chats, put 1s. Look at Andrew telling on himself. Said guilty as charged. Winter Blessing said, I don't watch it, Queen, LOL. Winter, I don't believe you. But let me continue. I'm just trying to make you guys laugh. But really, this is so crazy what they're doing. Okay, look at the lounge laughing. Battle X said, I can tell by their names. Yeah, I can tell by some of y'all's names. Please pay attention. But let's continue, guys. The Glaive said, I watch mostly all black. Okay, so now here's what they say. Applicable law. Let's talk about it. They say, whereas here, a defendant's bail application pending appeal was previously denied, a renewed motion for bail is properly considered as a motion for reconsideration by the court. Okay. Now they bring up this case, United States versus Velosaurus, from April 20th of 2023, finding that since the court already denied the defendant's request at the sentencing proceeding for bail pending appeal, the defendant's instant bail motion may be properly viewed as a motion to reconsider. Denying motion to reconsider detention ruling pending appeal where defendant failed to meet standard for motion for reconsideration. Okay, this is all these cases that they're referencing and saying what the ruling was in those cases. Now I'm going to skip down past some of this. Okay, a motion for reconsideration of a court order determining a motion must be filed. Now listen to this. This is where they get real petty. This is where they get real petty. I want you all to pay attention, okay? This is nothing but some petty bullshit. Now listen to this. A motion for reconsideration of a court order determining a motion must be filed within 14 days after the court's determination of the original motion. A memorandum no longer than 10 pages in length. Do y'all hear this? Setting forth concisely the matters or controlling decisions that counsel believes the court has overlooked must accompany this motion. Now, let me just tell y'all what this is. You see how they're being so specific? They're literally being petty as hell. They're trying to find, they're grasping at straws. They're trying to find anything that they can to make an excuse for this man not to get bail. So are they serious here talking about it has to be filed within 14 days of the court's determination of the original motion? And then the memorandum no longer than 10 pages in length. What is this, a term paper for college? It sounds like something I tell my students. Okay, so anyway, prior to the adoption of Local Rule 49.1, courts in this district applied local civil rules for motion for consideration in criminal cases, and thus courts apply that same standard of review for motion seeking reconsideration under Local Criminal Rule 49.1 and Local Civil Rule 6.3 and the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. This is all just a load of BS. I just want you all to pay attention. Now, they go on to say A motion for reconsideration will generally be denied unless the moving party can point to controlling decisions or data that the court overlooked. So they're acting like, okay, this is the norm. Don't worry if it gets denied because that's what it's going to get. Well, don't worry because that's normally what happens. Y'all hear this? Yeah, that's what they're basically saying. They said they will generally get denied, these motions for reconsideration. Okay, unless there's data that the court overlooked. Well, here's what the court overlooked. I'm going to tell you right now what they overlooked. In the first place, when Diddy asked for bail, when his attorneys asked for bail after he was acquitted of the more serious charges, and the judge seemed as though he was about to grant it to him. He said, Mr. Combs, you don't want to go back to the MDC, do you? And Diddy shaking his head vigorously like, no. And so the judge says, well, let me go look over the paperwork and see what I can do. And then Maureen Comey, aka Karen Bigfoot, stood up and started making this argument that, in my opinion, was asinine because she kept talking about his violence, his propensity to violence in the video and all of that. But the thing is, the judge seemed to have overlooked and the prosecution seemed to have overreached because that video and the violence that they spoke about was not what Diddy was even charged of, nor was he convicted. So I feel like that shouldn't have had anything to do with him asking for bond. Because when he asked for bail for the Mann Act violations, where's the violence in that? There was nothing violent pertaining to that. There was nothing violent pertaining to that. Now, I know they tried to link that video, but that didn't fly. Okay, so that seems to have been overlooked as far as I'm concerned, but let's continue. They say matters in other words, that might reasonably be expected to alter the conclusion reached by the court. Okay, then they reference another case. Now, to warrant reconsideration, the moving party bears the heavy burden of showing an intervening change of controlling law, the availability of new evidence, or the need to correct a clear error or prevent a manifest justice. So they want them to find an error. Okay, they want them to find an error. I bet you if Mark Agnifilo looks long enough, I'm sure he could find an error somewhere. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. So they say the availability of new evidence or the need to correct a clear error or prevent a manifest injustice. Okay, so manifest injustice. Well, what that means is it refers to basically a situation where the outcome of a legal proceeding is plainly and obviously unfair and unjust. Isn't that what the Mann Act is? We know it was rooted in racism. We know that they usually prosecute black men for it more so. We know that there's no other cases like Diddy's where the person was the John and didn't have sex with the people that were supposedly taken across state lines to engage in prostitution. He just sat there and watched. But they don't want to give him bail. This is manifest injustice. Okay, please pay attention. It is the fundamental rights or the gross a violation of the fundamental rights. And we know that's what it is because his team has already said that they violated his First Amendment rights. I want y'all to pay attention. And it also pertains to a gross miscarriage of justice. Okay? And that's what it is. Okay? That's what it is. It's a high standard that requires a clear and significant departure from what is considered fair and just. And it's also typically invoked when the normal legal processes have failed to produce a fair result. They did produce an unfair result because Diddy should have gotten bail in the first place. Everybody else that's been convicted under the Mann Act got bail. Okay? So anyway, let me continue. Now they go on to say if the judicial officer, or they say, wait a minute, where a judicial officer has issued a detention order following a hearing pending trial, the hearing may be reopened. If the judicial officer finds that information exists that was not known to the movement at the time, the hearing and that has a material bearing on the issue of whether there are conditions of release that will reasonably assure the appearance of such person as required and safety of any other person and the community. Nevertheless, as discussed herein, assuming the court can reconsider its discussion under its inherent power to reconsider his own filing, The defendant has not made the requisite showing for such reconsideration. Okay, and this is what they're saying. I mean, what do they want Diddy to do? I'm not sure what they want this man to do. It seems like he can't do anything because they're basically saying, unless y'all got some new damn evidence, okay, unless y'all can prove that we made a mistake, there was some type of error going on here, there's nothing, he doesn't need to get out. Now, and also, unless y'all can prove that he's significantly changed and that he's got a remorse and that he can prove that he's not a danger to the community, he needs to stay in jail. Well, how can Diddy satisfactorily prove to them, to their satisfaction, that is, how can he prove to them that he's not a danger to the community? I don't think he could, because I don't think they want to see him as not being a threat. But again, murderers get bail. Further, the defendant fails to point to any intervening change of controlling law, new evidence, clear error, or need to prevent a manifest injustice has occurred. Indeed, the defense previously presented to the court its assessment of the defendant's risk of flight and dangerousness. Okay, so the defense did not present anything to prove that the defense previously presented to the court its assessment. Oh, basically saying just what they think would show that he's not a risk of flight and dangerousness. The defendant's current motion raises no new issue that the court overlooked in that regard. Similarly, during the bail hearing, the defense put forth the argument that it argues here with respect to exceptional circumstances, namely that the circumstances of the defendant's Mann Act convictions present exceptional circumstances warranting his release from custody. Now, the court heard defense counsel on that point and rejected its position, finding that irrespective of any exceptional circumstances, the defendant could not establish by clear and convincing evidence that he was not a danger to the community. What would they want him to do or say to prove that to them? I'm just wondering. In addition, as discussed below, the defense raised the conditions at the MDC with the court during the prior bail hearing, but stated the opposite of what they now claim. See, this is what I'm talking about. Pay attention to this part right here. Okay. In addition, as discussed below, the defense raised the conditions at the MDC with the court during the prior bail hearing, but stated the opposite of what they now claim presents extraordinary circumstances, they say. Because here's what Mark Agnifilo previously said. I think it was Agnifilo that said, I want to thank the MDC. The MDC gave us good access to him. They made it work. And Your Honor helped us out a great deal by giving us access to him. So I want you all to pay attention to this. This is all some BS. And they're trying to, I wouldn't say they're trying to manipulate words, but they're trying to push a false narrative, because just listen to this. He says they made it work. Now, he was thanking them. He wasn't saying that the conditions at MDC were good, you know, that there wasn't problematic things going on there. He was just saying that they allowed the attorneys to be able to meet with their client. That's all he was saying. But listen to this. He says, I want to thank the MDC. The MDC gave us good access to him. They made it work. And Your Honor helped us out a great deal by giving us access to him. They then say, the defense cannot now claim that there was an intervening change in the conditions at MDC to justify the court's reconsideration. Like, now, don't try to act like it's problems there, like the food has maggots, like there's rats, like there's dangers, inmates coming up dead. Don't try to say any of that stuff, because you already said it was good. You even thanked them. That's their argument, okay, in a nutshell. Doing so would relitigate old issues or otherwise take a second bite at the apple, which is not the province of a motion for reconsideration. Accordingly, since the defense has failed to carry its burden of showing controlling decisions or matters overlooked by the court should deny the defendant's motion for reconsideration from the court's July the 2nd order. Now, the defendant has failed to show any exceptional reasons. So even setting aside the defendant's failure to meet or even address the proper standard for a motion for reconsideration, the defendant's motion still fails, as this court previously found because the defendant was convicted of felonies under Chapter 117, his detention is mandatory pursuant to the Bail Reform Act. And once again, the defendant has not met the requirements of the so-called safety valve in 18 U.S.C. Statute 3145C, which requires defendants to prove by clear and convincing evidence that they are not a flight risk or a danger and that exceptional reasons exist making detention appropriate. Let me tell you this. When they keep saying, because they're going to say this again, when they talk about Diddy being a flight risk, what's interesting about that is they're saying he hasn't proven it. But didn't Diddy, in fact, and didn't his attorneys, in fact, say that they would turn over his passport, they would give them $50 million and be willing to wear an ankle monitor and agree to only go from New York to Florida? They don't think that that makes him less of a flight risk, if at all, because who's going to leave $50 million behind? He said that he would leave his private jet parked where it is in New York, or wherever it is. I believe it's in New York. But nonetheless, he said he would leave the private jet parked, and they can monitor that. If he has on an ankle monitor, they can tell where he is. And then he's willing to put up $50 million, like I said. So what are they talking about? He can't prove, and also surrender his passport. Where is he going to go? And so anyway, they're saying he hasn't proven that he's not a flight risk. Well, here's the thing. They haven't proven that he is. You see, it doesn't seem to be the same standard of equality going on here. It seems like the prosecution is just saying whatever the hell they want and making their case an argument while knocking down and shutting down anything that the defense says, countering anything they say, and poking holes in it and saying, this is wrong, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. But what are they doing? It's like those fake fact checkers we used to have during the pandemic, remember? And how they would say, oh, that's been debunked. But they would never tell us how or why it was debunked or by who. They would never show us the proof of receipts that this statement over here has been proven false and why it has been proven false, because this over here is true. They never did that. They just simply told us it's been debunked. That's what they're doing. Because they're saying that they haven't proven that he is not a flight risk, but the prosecution, hasn't proven that he is. They're just saying that he is, or they think that he is. They haven't proven it. What makes him a flight risk? Because he has money, because he has resources, because he has his own jet? Even if all of those things are true, what makes them so certain that he'll use any of those things to flee? Has he tried to flee before? What gives them this? What makes them so certain of this? Okay, they're just full of crap as far as I'm concerned, but let's continue. Now, they go on to say the defendant spills much ink explaining why the underlying facts of his convictions make his continued incarceration exceptional. Now, I want you to pay attention. Now, they were being real petty right there. When they said the defendant spills much ink, they're just basically saying that he's just writing down a bunch of BS. Okay, trying to make his case. Okay, that's what that is. This is all a hot mess, but let me continue. Likes up, everyone. Please don't forget to like and share. So they go on to say, however, the defendant's arguments are baseless. Ooh, do y'all hear this? They're baseless, misleading, and run counter to the clear intent expressed by Congress. First, they say the court should not entertain the defendant's request to override the clear intent of Congress by putting aside the mandatory detention provision in Statute 3143A and 2 in favor of examining the facts underlying his convictions. The defendant points to no authority for this novel theory, nor could he, because Congress could not have been clearer. Those defendants found guilty of any felony under Chapter 117 of the United States Code shall be detained. Let me see something here. Let me just check into this real quick. Okay. Let me just check into this real quick. I'm about to look this up. Real quick. Hold on. Which one is this? Hold on, beloveds. By putting aside the mandatory detention provisions, examining. Congress did not say that mandatory detention applies only to some felonies under 117, depending on the facts underlying the conviction. Congress said that mandatory detention applies to any felony under Chapter 117.8. Okay. Hold on. Let me just fact check real quick. Detention applies to any felonies. Okay, well, that's not what it says, just like I thought. Hold on, let me just make sure. It says there is, hold on. Hold on, let me make sure I got the right one. 3143. Hold on, beloveds. Damn it. What just happened? Okay, it says under statute 3142, Congress does not say that all felonies require detention. Instead, it specifies certain categories of offenses for which a detention hearing must be held and the presumption of detention must apply. Okay, but that's not the same one. So anyway, listen, they're doing the absolute most as far as I'm concerned. That's what these people are doing. These people are doing the absolute most. Please pay attention. And they're being real petty. When they're sitting there being so specific about the number of pages and all that stuff, it's just absolutely crazy. Okay, it's just absolutely crazy. Please pay attention. Hold on, beloveds. I'm having technical issues for a second. Hold on. Let me just remove some of this stuff out of queue and try to bring this back up. Hold on, give me just a second. And I don't know what is going on with StreamYard this morning, but it is so annoying. Okay, here we go. Sorry for the inconvenience. All right, let me reopen this. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, now with that all being said, these people are doing the absolute most. That's what they're doing. Now let me go back to where I was. Okay, so here we go. So they go on to say that even setting aside the defendant's failure to meet or even address the proper standard for a motion for reconsideration, the defendant's motion still fails. As the court previously found, because the defendant was convicted of felonies under Chapter 117. This detention is mandatory pursuant to the Bail Reform Act. Okay, I read all that. Hold on. Okay, here we go right here. Now, they go on to say that encouraging the court to consider the facts underlying the defendant's convictions as exceptional reasons under Statute 3145 defies Congress's clear intent to make detention mandatory with respect to certain categories of felony convictions. Statute 3145. Okay, so 18 USC Code Statute 3145 deals with the review and appeal of retrial release, or I'm sorry, of pretrial release or detention orders in federal criminal cases. It provides the procedures for challenging magistrate or district judge's decisions on whether a defendant should be detained or released before trial. So if a magistrate judge releases a defendant, the prosecutor can file a motion to revoke or amend that order. Okay, they keep saying before trial. We know the trial is over, but this is something that is usually requested prior to trial, when somebody's trying to go get bail, but also after someone's convicted, the same thing applies. So anyway, they go on to say this motion is reviewed by a district court judge. The district judge can hold a new hearing and make a fresh decision. Now, review of detention order. If a magistrate judge or judge orders detention, the defendant can appeal it by filing a motion to revoke or amend the detention order. The district court must review the detention order promptly. The judge can either uphold the detention or release with conditions. Well, that's what he needs to do, release with conditions. Okay, now, exception for certain appeals, which is rarely used. Now, this one allows a person subject to mandatory detention, like a certain for certain types of rug crimes or violent crimes. Okay, it allows them to be released under exceptional reasons while awaiting sentencing or appeal. This section is not often used after conviction. After conviction, I want you all to pay attention here. Okay, that's why I'm fact checking them, because they're full of BS. So I want you all to pay attention, because this is exactly the argument they're making. Statute 3145C. They're saying, and it says here, this one is rarely used. Like nobody uses this, okay, except for people like them that are trying desperately and clearly grasping at straws and overreaching and being biased, racially biased. That's when they pull out stuff like this, okay? It allows a person subject to mandatory detention. They did say that it was mandatory. Okay, it allows them, if they have mandatory detention for somebody per se who has been selling a certain type of illegal substances or violent crimes. Here's the problem with that. Diddy was not convicted of a violent crime. This violence of which they keep speaking has nothing to do with his 2-man act convictions, nothing. So why are they being allowed to keep bringing up the violence? It allows them to be released only under exceptional reasons while awaiting sentencing or appeal. This section is most often used after conviction, but before sentencing. Okay, I think I misread that or misinterpreted that in my mind before. Okay, so they use this after the conviction, but before sentencing. Well, that's why they're using it now, clearly. So they say that it gives both the government and the defendant a way to challenge pretrial detention or release orders. It allows higher level judges to reconsider and reverse lower court decisions regarding bail and detention. I'm going to see if I can find a specific case. That had a Mann Act violation when this was used. Let's see here. Oh, well, what do you know? First one pops up is Jeffrey Epstein. Okay. The first one that comes up is Jeffrey Epstein. The next one that comes up is R. Kelly. And then the state versus Jack Johnson. And then Ghislaine Maxwell, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, let me continue. Likes up, everyone, please like and share. Now, let's listen to the rest of what they have to say about all of this. Joy said, is there more to the story? This is all just, hold on, let me keep going. Okay, so anyway, they say second, this is their second point of business. They say there is nothing unusual about a defendant being detained after being convicted only on Mann Act counts. Okay, defendant charged with trafficking and Mann Act violations remain detained after pleading guilty to Mann Act violations. They're referencing another case, the United States versus Blake. Okay, then they go on to talk about another case where they say defendant charged with trafficking and Mann Act violations remained detained after pleading guilty. Simply put, a criminal conviction, even one that the defendant erroneously suggests is novel in its application of the statute of conviction, is a far cry from the types of exceptional reasons sufficient to justify bail pending sentencing where mandatory remand applies. We feel that the reasons proffered by defendant, though unfortunate, are not exceptional. They're saying there's nothing exceptional about this. So basically, they just like stay in jail. They go on to say, rather, we think reasons similar in gravity to those presented by defendant attend most instances in which a defendant's detention is at issue. Now, the defendant cites 2 cases that he claims involve similarly situated defendants in which the defendants were released on bond conditions following Mann Act convictions. However, even a cursory review of those cases reveals, other than the statutes of conviction, these defendants are not even the slightest bit similarly situated to the defendant. This is what the prosecution is saying. They're like, this is not even like Diddy, okay? Similar charges, yes, but the insides and the interworkings of their convictions are nothing similar to Diddy's. The defendant first points to the convictions of defendants John Trowbridge, Michael Steinbrück, and Ronald Tills in the Western District of New York, and claims that because those 3 individuals were released on bonds following their guilty pleas, he too should be released on bonds. But these defendants were all far less culpable, okay, than the defendant. And in fact, the government never sought their detention pre-sentencing, nor did the court appear to consider mandatory remand. Unlike the defendant who transported men and women repeatedly for purposes of engaging in prostitution over the course of more than a decade, Steinbrück was convicted of conspiring to transport a woman across state lines for purposes of engaging in commercial sex work on a single occasion. So they're saying because Diddy did it a bunch of times over a whole decade and this person only did it one time, they're saying that's the difference. Here's the bottom line, though. Diddy was only convicted of it, okay, this time. Similarly, Trowbridge admitted to transporting women across state lines on 2 occasions, and Tills, who was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment, admitted to transporting women across the state lines on 6 occasions within a 2-year period. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. What proof do they have? And I want you all to really think about this. What proof do they have of how many times Diddy did this? They could say it was over 10 decades or over a decade. How many times did he do it over a decade? Was he doing it once every month? So 12 times a year for 10 years? Was he doing it once a year? So 10 times in 10 decades? I mean, in 1 decade? How do they know that? Where's the proof of that? Did the S workers testify to that? I don't think they did. Now, Cassie and J. Doe said that sometimes they would fly to New York or whatever. Some of the S workers, I think one of the S workers at least may have said that as well. But my question is, how often was this happening? See, these are the things I would have the defense having them to come up with. They're trying to put the defense to work. I would put their asses to work. Okay, that's what I would do. Now, with that all being said, they're talking about these cases of Trowbridge and Tills and Steinbrück, right? I'm going to pull up their case. These people that they're talking about, these people committed all these acts together, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going to pull up their case and we're going to read about it and see if it's similar to Diddy's, worse than Diddy's, or whatever. And I'm willing to bet money that it's probably worse. And but they got bail and Diddy didn't. Okay, I want y'all to pay attention. Let's go to the FBI website. Okay, here it is. That was easy. Okay. Now I'm going to share this on the screen. We're going to look at this, okay? We're going to look at this and see what is going on here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is from the FBI's website. So here's what it says. This was May the 7th of 2009, Buffalo, New York. Kathleen M. Methtreader, acting U.S. Attorney of the Western District of New York, announced that John Trowbridge, age 62, a retired detective. Oh, so he's a former police officer. Okay. That's probably why he got bail. Okay. That's probably it right there. What do y'all think? But let's see what the charges look like. The criminal activity of it all. A retired detective with the city of Lockport Police Department from Lockport, New York, was sentenced this morning by the United States District Judge William M. Scretany to 2 years probation. Probation. I want y'all to pay attention. 2 years probation and fined $10,000 for knowingly transporting a female in interstate commerce with the intent that the female engage in prostitution, i.e. the Mann Act. Trowbridge had waived indictment and pled guilty to this offense on March the 20th of 2008. Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert C. Muscati, who handled the prosecution, stated the defendant admitted that in late October of 2005, he, Ronald Tills, a former New York State Supreme Court judge, y'all hear this? These are cops and judges doing the same thing Diddy did, and they got bail. See, they're the ones who shouldn't have gotten bail. They're the ones who should have been deemed a threat to the community. Don't police officers and judges have so many connections on the inside? Nobody thought that they could be a danger to their victims? Are y'all listening? So this is all given preferential treatment. Okay? They should have gotten more extreme consequences just for the fact that they work within the judicial system. But how many times have I told you guys that the criminal justice system is run by criminals? Some of y'all didn't believe that. Did y'all hear this? Do y'all hear this? But let's continue. See, this is why you got to look stuff up. You can't let them just tell you the summary of a case in their own words because they'll push narratives. Okay? So it goes on to say that Ronald Tills, a former New York State Supreme Court, not regular court, Supreme Court Judge Michael Steinbeck, and then Michael Steinbeck, and former confidential law clerk to Judge Tills, and others transported a woman from the Western New York area to Kentucky and intended for the woman to engage in prostitution in Kentucky with members of a men's organization. This sounds like a prostitution ring to me. What do y'all think? This sounds like worse than what Diddy did, honey. And then here's the thing. They said they only did this once, and one of them said they did it twice. This is a whole damn lie, okay? I told you they was lying. I'm pretty sure this happened a whole bunch of times. This sounds like a prostitution ring. And you think they only did it 1 or 2 times. Please miss me with it, but let's continue. So they go on to say that they had them engage in prostitution in Kentucky with members of a men's, that's multiple men, organization known as the Royal Order of Jesters. Sounds like a secret society. Trowbridge admitted that the Jesters held weekend meetings where it was their custom to make women available to the members for sexual activity in exchange for money. Hold the hell up. This sounds a whole lot more than like the Mann Act violations. It sounds like trafficking. It sounds like a prostitution ring. Trowbridge, and these are judges and former law enforcement. Okay? That's what these people are. Now they say Trowbridge and Steinbeck have now been sentenced for their roles in this illegal conduct until sentencing is pending. Lewa Chong, the owner of the acupressure spa where the women Trowbridge transported were employed, now it's really giving trafficking because a lot of those spas have people in there that are being trafficked, okay, and made to do all sorts of nefarious things for little to no money, while the people who are in charge get the cash. So please pay attention to that. Now, they say the person, Lee Wah Chong, the owner of the acupuncture spa where the women Trowbridge transporter was employed, was sentenced on November the 18th of 2008 to 6 years imprisonment in order to pay 10 trafficking victims. See, they were trafficking victims, clearly, $350,000 after her conviction of a commercial trafficking offense for operating 4 area acupuncture or acupressure spas or massage parlors now closed, which were fronts for prosta you-know-hootie. Y'all heard that? Y'all heard that? See, I told you, it sounded like a whole prostitution ring, and that's what it was. And these businesses, acupuncture spas and massage parlors, they were just fronts. You see, people who don't look like Diddy do this all the time. Let's talk about it, because remember the guy, what is his name? Oh, the guy that owns one of the NFL teams, Roger Kraft. He was busted doing this stuff down there in Mar-a-Lago. They were staying at Trump's resort. It's a bunch of them. About 4 or 5 years ago, I reported on it. Okay, they had these Asian women who were being trafficked, and these women were made to service them. They would come down there on the weekends and all of that. It was like over 200 of them. Okay, you think they went to prison? Let me continue. So at the sentencing, USA Muscati, the leader of the district's human trafficking task force and alliance, stated to the court that the task force existed in large part to rescue victims of these types of crimes. Muscati noted in response to the defendant's statement that he had tried to help an employee in the spa whom he's told was free to leave if she so desired, that such women do not believe they have such a choice to certain characteristics and vulnerabilities which traffickers try to exploit. So this is all what was going on. These people are really down here trafficking people and had a whole prostitution ring going on. But hold on, let's get to the last part of it. Acting U.S. Attorney Mel Tretter commended the work of the district's Human Trafficking Task Force and Alliance, which investigated the matter. In November of 2006, the Attorney General announced the creation of this task force in the Western District of New York, one of 42 nationwide. Now they say it's a collaboration of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies working together to identify, rescue, and assist victims of human trafficking, human smuggling, and other civil and human rights offenses. I want you all to pay. Do you all hear what these people were doing? You all hear what these people were doing? They were trafficking these women. They were violating the Mann Acts. And do you all hear what their sentence was? And they got bail. But they don't want Diddy to get bail. Are y'all listening to this? And this is one of the cases that Diddy's team referenced. And I'm sure the reason they referenced it was to say this. It's like Diddy's, only in the fact that the people were accused of Mann Act violations, that they were guilty of Mann Act violations. But the bottom line is they picked it because these people did way worse than what Diddy's been convicted of. And they're saying they were actually trafficking for real, for real. They're not just taking people over there so they can watch them, do corn. They were forcing these women to do things and had these spas as fronts and had a whole organization of men making them service them. Well, they collect coins, but they got bail. And they got short sentences. But they're saying now they feel like Diddy needs to get more than 4 or 5 years. Do y'all hear this? Honey, these people are nefarious. I just want y'all to pay attention. But let's continue. And that was straight from the FBI's website, as I said. Okay. I just find this all crazy at the end of the day. Now let's go back to the documents. Likes up, everyone, please. Like and share. Thank you in advance. This is all crazy to me. Okay, so now with that all being said, they listed another case. Hold on, let me see where I was. Okay, so they go on to say, now listen to this part. Unlike the defendant who transported men and women repeatedly for purposes of engaging in prostitution over the course of more than a decade, they're really trying to make Diddy sound like he's worse than them. He's not. He may have been doing this for more than a decade, but these people were consenting adults. And that's what the jury obviously thought. And he's sitting there watching them have sexual activity. He's not making any money off of this. In fact, he's the one spending money. He's not putting guns to anybody's head and forcing them, throwing them in the back of a truck with their hands tied. He's not doing any of that. He's not putting up a front and having them work out of a building that's supposed to be used for something else, and then having people come in and get services unbeknownst to people on the outside looking in. He's not doing any of that, but that's what these people were doing. But hold on. Let's keep going. So they say similarly, Trowbridge admitted to transporting the women across the state lines on 2 occasions. That's just what he admitted to. See, just because he said he admitted to it twice, that doesn't mean he only did it twice. Okay, you think he's going to tell the truth? They could have been doing this for years themselves, for all we know, and for all they know, the prosecution. So they go on to say, they talk about someone by the name of Tills. Tills was sentenced to 18 months in prison and admitted to transporting women across state lines on 6 occasions within a 2-year period. That's a lot. 6 times in 2 years, and he got 18 months. And even after all that other stuff that was going on that I just read to you, because they don't talk about that here. That's why you have to fact check them. Moreover, none of the Trowbridge defendants were alleged to have physically assaulted anyone in connection with the conduct. That doesn't mean anything. If they had guns on those people, or if they, were able to coerce them or force them into doing things out of threats and intimidation, then they wouldn't need to be violent. And let's not forget that Diddy was addicted to illegal substances, which makes a person a whole lot more volatile, aggressive, hostile, okay, unpredictable. Were these people on illegal substances? Diddy was a whole addict. He OD'd. So did Cassie. Are they factoring in the fact that Diddy could have suffered from diminished capacity because of the years of substance abuse? You see how they play? This is how they do. Okay, so anyway, let me continue. Now, they go on to say, moreover, none of the Trowbridge defendants, were alleged to have physically assaulted anyone in connection with the conduct, and Stybridge transported the victim, but did not have any sexual contact with her. Diddy didn't have any sexual contact with him either. Okay? And this is probably why his lawyers pulled this case, because that's another thing about it that's similar to him. This person claims they didn't have any sexual contact, but we know Diddy didn't, because the ex-workers said it. And so did the women, Jane Doe and Cassie. And another thing is, even when Diddy was violent with them, he wasn't convicted of it. So again, they keep bringing that up. All right. And so it goes on to say, both provided substantial assistance to the government, resulting in the government moving a sentencing for a downward departure. Okay, so they provided substantial assistance to the government. Now, the defendant also points to the conviction of Mario Collins, who was ultimately sentenced to 24 months imprisonment after he was convicted of a Mann Act violation for supporting or transporting a victim on a single occasion. Collins was released after a mistrial was declared on the charges. Okay. On the charges against him, including trafficking and Mann Act offenses, and remained on bail after his subsequent conviction on the Mann Act charge. They said the defendant argues that he, like Collins, should be released. But this does not bear the weight that the defendant attempts to place on it. At the time that Collins was initially released after mistrial, Collins was not subject to mandatory remand, which means being returned back to, because unlike the defendant, he had not been convicted of any offenses. Well, he was convicted because they had a mistrial. Moreover, while Collins remained on bail after his conviction, it was entirely unclear whether the court even considered the mandatory remand provision. Conclusions that can be drawn from the court's bail decisions is that the case are limited at best. Okay, so let's look up that case. Let's look up that case, because now they're saying that Till wasn't convicted. I mean, not Till, Collins, Mario Collins. He wasn't convicted because of the mistrial, but then when he was convicted, he still was on bail. So let's see if we can figure it all out. Let's see if we can find out why. And I'm going to read this to you. This is from the Justice Government website. Okay, so Oxford, Mississippi. U.S. Attorney William C. Lamar and FBI Special Agent in charge, Christopher Freeze, announced today that a Memphis man was sentenced in Mississippi on Thursday for his role in a human trafficking scheme. Mario D. Collins of Memphis, Tennessee, was sentenced to 24 months imprisonment. So here's the thing. Let me just tell you all something. They keep talking about how many times these people did these things. Do you think that matters? If you're a human trafficker, okay, you've literally been trafficking people for profit and all of that, which is also a form of slavery. And you only got 24 months. It doesn't matter how many times you did it. And that's maybe only the times that they could prove they did it. Who knows how many times or how often traffickers are actually out there trafficking? Okay. It's not 1 or 2 times. I can tell you that much. Anyway, just from research. Now they go on to say that Mario D. Collins of Memphis, Tennessee, was sentenced to 24 months imprisonment by U.S. District Judge Michael P. Mills for trafficking a victim from Georgia to Tennessee and ultimately to Oxford, Mississippi for commercial sex purposes. An investigation conducted by the Oxford Police Department and the FBI revealed that the female victim was transported from Atlanta, Georgia to Oxford, Mississippi by Collins and Clayton so that she could engage in prostitution. Evidence presented at a December 2017 trial established that OPD officers responded to an Oxford hotel on April the 27th of 2017 after they received a 911 call indicating that the victim was being held against her will. See, Diddy wasn't holding anybody against their will. They were all consenting to be there. Collins and Clayton were arrested in the hotel parking lot, and the victim was recovered from inside the hotel. You think this was their first time at the rodeo? They've been doing this. This might have been the first time they got caught. But you think this was their first victim? Not the way they had this all set up. Now, the prosecution is painting narratives and giving half truths and only telling the parts of the story that suit their narrative. That's why I'm looking into the cases that they're talking about. Okay, so that all been said, they said ODP officers Joshua Shipp and Brandon Jenkins were among the officers who initially responded to the 911 call and assisted throughout the investigation and the trial of the case. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Clay Dabbs and Sam Stringfellow represented the United States in this case, which was spearheaded by agents and officers from the FBI and the Oxford Police Department. They go on to say, Lamar further remarked that we were dedicated to keeping our community safe, especially from human trafficking. Women, many of whom were very young, they are often coerced into prostitution by predators, taken advantage of, and are frequently victims of violence themselves. We will continue to work with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to address this problem in our district. Human trafficking is in any form is reprehensible, and those who promote trafficking humans, whether it's for sex or labor, are not welcome in our communities, they say. Okay, so these people are human traffickers. Okay, y'all listening? These people are 10 times worse than Diddy. Do y'all hear this? These people are 10 times worse than Diddy. That's what they are. These people are here forcing people to have sex, okay, against their will and all of that through force, fraud, and coercion, okay? And they get slaps on the wrist. But these people don't even want Diddy to get bail. Let's continue. I think the prosecution is just mad because they took an L. That's what that is. So the third point they make is even if the court were to consider the facts underlying the convictions in considering exceptional circumstances, the nature of the defendant's crimes reflect aggravating, not mitigating factors, and therefore support the defendant's detention, not his release. The court should reject the defendant's minimized version of his own conduct when he describes himself as a mere John. Far from being an ordinary and casual consumer of commercial sex, the defendant transported individuals for the purpose of prostitution on hundreds of occasions over the course of decades. How do they know it's been hundreds of occasions? Where's the proof? See, they're just throwing out numbers. That's what they're doing. They're just throwing out numbers. They have no proof. There was none shown in court that Diddy, in fact, did this hundreds of times. Okay? And when I say hundreds of times, I'm talking about specifically taking people across state lines. They don't have the proof. They never showed any proof of that. So plied Cassie Ventura and Jane, as well as male S workers with rugs to ensure their continued participation in the days-long freak-offs. These people participated because they wanted to, and they took the rugs because they wanted to. He didn't force it down their throats. He didn't put guns to their heads. The rugs were right there on the table. And the S workers have said that Cassie was the one who told them about the rugs. And that book that I was reading, to those of you who are members, that guy said that Cassie was the one who explained to him what all the rugs were and how they worked and how they made you feel. And she's the one who kept consistently trying to persuade and coerce him even to take them, to the point that so much so, Diddy finally said, listen, chill out. He said no. That's what Cassie did. Maybe she should have some Mann Act violations. But let's continue. Okay, and so used violence against both Miss Ventura and Jane in connection with freak-offs and enjoyed a small army of personal staff to ensure that his every need was met during the freak-offs. Here's the thing. The S worker said that there was no violence pertaining to them doing the freak-offs as to where he was trying to do violence to force them to do the freak-offs. They said the violence was only when Cassie specifically, they said the violence was only when Cassie would break the rules of the freak-off. And then Diddy would get jealous, like she'd be having sex with the men when Diddy's not around. That's when the violence would start, because he'd get mad and jealous, and they were both always high. That's what the S workers have said, at least two of them. Okay, so, and that's also in Clayton Howard's book. So anyway, Ventura and Jane in connection with the freak-offs had employed a small army, they say. See how they're exaggerating a small army? 3 to 4 people is nowhere near an army, okay? An army of personal staff to ensure that his every need was met during the freak-offs. And the defendant's actions surely distinguish him from an ordinary John. Yeah, they do, because ordinary Johns engage in sex with the workers that they hire. And he didn't. He just sat there and watched them. Just like people who make corn. They sit there and watch and direct, don't they? Finally, the court should reject the defendant's pages-long recitation of historic Justice Department policy as both relevant and misleading. In the past, the department had a policy specifically related to enforcement of the Mann Act, which focused on prosecuting the Mann Act in the context of commercial cases. But the department no longer has a specific policy related to the Mann Act. In fact, the department's current guidance includes a policy titled Prosecution of Customers Involved in Federal S-Trafficking Offenses, in place since December of 2020, which prioritizes reducing demand for S-trafficking by prosecuting those who engage in commercial sex with victims of S-trafficking, including buyers of commercial sex. In other words, it was squarely within the priorities of the modern-day Justice Department to charge the conduct described above under a variety of federal statutes, including the Mann Act, which is exactly what the government did in this case. The defendant's suggestion otherwise, relying on defunct policies, is inaccurate and misleading. The defendant claims that his conditions of confinement at the MDC are exceptional circumstances. For the reasons described below, they are not. They say in making this argument, the defendant relies primarily on Judge Furman's opinion in the United States versus Chavez. Now, in that opinion, which was published on January the 4th of last year, over 8 months before Combs stepped foot in the MDC, Judge Furman found that the MDC's conditions at the time, in conjunction with the defendant's old age and serious medical conditions, constituted exceptional circumstances under Statute 3145C. And that's the statute that I read to you all previously, where the judge can basically decide to let someone go or not. During appeal, well, it deals with review and appeal of the pretrial release or detention. Okay, so basically the magistrate judge can release the defendant, or if they release the defendant, the prosecutor can then file a motion to revoke or amend that order. Like they can even go against what the judge has said. All right, so anyway, goes on to say, in doing so, Judge Furman described the conditions at the MDC at the time, which included extensive lockdowns, inadequate medical care, and problematic physical conditions, problems attributable in large part to the MDC's staffing shortages. The defendant claims without evidence that these conditions have not abated during his detention at MDC. He is incorrect. Oh, so the conditions got better? Is that what they're telling us? During the defendant's stay at the MDC, the facility has made enormous strides in increasing and stabilizing their staffing levels, improving medical services, and improving physical conditions. For example, They talk about how staffing at the MDC has increased dramatically. The Correctional Services Department of the MDC is now staffed at 94.2% compared to 55% in January 2024 when Chavez was published. Medical staffing has also increased, with the health department currently being staffed at 86.6% as compared to 69% in January of 2024. The staffing has decreased the lockdowns described in Chavez. So in 2025, they said the MDC had not locked down or modified its operations for any housing unit as a result of staffing shortage. And also, they say medical care has improved. In addition to increased medical staffing, the MDC has issued or increased its use of telehealth services for quicker and more efficient medical checks for inmates. And last but not least, the MDC has undergone facility repairs and improvements, including in the past few months. These have included repairs of emergency call buttons, upgrades for security cameras, and improvements to elevators. Oh, yeah, sure, this will make him want to stay. It's crazy. Given these improvements, Chavez no longer provides an accurate picture of conditions at the MDC or a basis to find extraordinary circumstances under Statute 3145C. Indeed, Judge Furman himself observed more than 2 months ago that conditions at MDC are a lot better when I wrote my opinion in the United States versus Chavez, including with regard to staffing levels, medical services, and incidents of violence. Okay, so y'all, I'm telling you, they're pulling out all the stops. Okay. I'm going to read this last part right here. They say he's a flight risk. Okay, let me read this last couple of pages. So they say the defendant was also violent towards Virginia Gina Hun, with whom the defendant was in a relationship at the same time as Ms. Ventura. So they're talking about his violence. They talk about Carrie, Brianna Bongalon, who we know is a whole liar who lied. Carrie was a liar who lied too. Okay. I'm sorry, not Carrie, Mia. Carrie did a good job. Now, but they're bringing up all these other people that accused Diddy of violence. Deontay Nash, Mia, Brianna Bongalon, Carrie, and of course, Jane Doe, Cassie, and even Gina, who wasn't even there. Okay, they're going by that video she did with Tasha K, apparently, that interview. More recently, the defendant brutally attacked Jane in June of 2024, also in the context of a freak-off. As Jane testified at trial after she initiated a physical confrontation with the defendant, she repeatedly locked herself in rooms in her home to protect herself from the defendant. Now, the defendant kicked down each door. The defendant also kicked Jane's legs out from under her, picked her up in a chokehold, punched her in the face twice, punched her and kicked her repeatedly. They just keep bringing up all this violence, but he wasn't convicted of any of it. Okay? Kicked her repeatedly when she was on the ground and curled up in a ball and smacked her in the face 3 times while she was showering, resulting in Jane losing her balance and falling on the ground. Jane was left with a black eye and bruising and welts on her head. The defendant, who is significantly larger in size than Jane, had no visible injuries from the altercation. Under these circumstances, the defendant's claim that his violence against Jane was somehow provoked is disgraceful. Well, it was provoked. It was provoked. If you push anybody when they bend down to tie their shoe and you push their head into a marble counter, I promise you they're going to do something to you and it ain't going to be good. I promise you. Okay? I promise you. Especially if you hit them in the temple on a marble counter. Yeah, you're going to get something, honey. Okay? It was provoked as far as I'm concerned. Now, Diddy may have gone overboard, but the thing is, Jane Doe knew Diddy was violent. She'd already seen the video of Cassie getting the hell beat out of her. So why would she dare to put her hands on that man? To me, she tried to provoke him. I don't know why, but that's what it seems like. I don't know what her motive was, but she got what she paid for, is all I'm saying. Now, I don't condone violence against women by men specifically, but at the end of the day, if you do that to somebody, you can't think they're just going to sit there and smile, okay, and offer you a sandwich. But let me continue. So moreover, the fact that the defendant committed this vicious attack just 3 months prior to his arrest, and while he was unambiguously aware that he was under federal investigation, highlights, as the court concluded, a disregard for the rule of law and a propensity towards violence. The defendant contends that he does not pose a danger because the trial record does not reflect acts of violence by the defendant between 2008, when he ended his relationship with Cassie Ventura, and 2024, when he viciously assaulted Jane. As an initial matter, the defendant's violent attack of Jane and his years-long proclivity towards violence against Ms. Ventura and others is more than sufficient to establish his dangerousness. But the defendant's suggestion that he went several years without inflicting violence on another person simply is not true. The defendant did engage in several acts of violence between 2018 and 2014. Again, are they taking into consideration that Diddy is no longer on rugs? Okay. Absolute said it. Hold on. It's not too late to press charges against Jane for hitting him. Y'all are something else, but let me continue. So goes on to say the defendant's extensive history of violence and his continued attempt to minimize his recent violent conduct demonstrates his dangerousness and that he is not an amenable to supervision. The defendant utterly fails to establish by clear and convincing evidence as required that he does not pose a danger to the community. The defendant also fails to establish, now they talk about the defendant is a flight risk. The defendant also fails to establish by clear and convincing evidence that he is not a flight risk. The defendant faces significant penalties for his crimes of conviction. As raised in the government's July 2nd, 2025 submission, the government's initial view was that the defendant's guidelines range from 51 to 63 months. The government is continuing to assess the sentencing guidelines and expects that the appropriate guidelines range will be substantially higher. Possibility of a substantial sentence, such as in this case, is a significant factor in assessing the risk of flight. And then they reference the United States versus Scally and the United States versus Fishbane. Moreover, the defendant's endless financial means, coupled with his demonstrated ability to conceal his crimes, has his past efforts to bribe security officers, as well as, and he didn't get convicted of that either, as well as his general disregard for the rule of law described above, serve collectively to create a substantial flight risk. Accordingly, the defendant has also failed to demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence that he does not pose a flight risk. Conclusion: for the foregoing reasons, the defendant's motion should be denied, they say. All right, so y'all see that? Meredith Foster, Emily A. Johnson, Christy Slavic, Madison Reddick Smizer, Mitzi Steiner. All right. Classy 22 said this is ridiculous. They give murderers bail. Exactly. Like, it's just not making any sense to me, okay? It's not making any damn sense at all whatsoever. I'm not seeing where it makes any sense. Okay, you have cold-blooded killers out here who get bail. Okay, that's what you have. You have cold-blooded murderers who get bail. But they want to act like Diddy is so dangerous because he has a history of violence. Licensed federal officer Carol Banks says they are fishing. They seem to have exhausted all options with Diddy. There is someone in a high position stirring the pot. I absolutely agree, beloved. And here's the thing. Like I told you all, they're being real petty and they're sitting up here lying. Some of this stuff is outright lies, okay? That's why I went and looked up those cases. Some of that stuff, they were flat out lying. All right, please pay attention. And the prosecution is just full of crap because they were lying even during the trial. And I told you all that. Thank you. Mark says America has a history of violence. Exactly. Okay, somebody needs to deny America bail. All right. Isn't America, in fact, a danger to people who look like me? So we're supposed to be worried about Diddy. In all seriousness, folks, here's the bottom line. Diddy is getting counseling. He's no longer on illegal substances. At this point, they keep bringing up the violence because that's all they have to cling to. That's all that they can use to try and make it make sense. So with that all being said, yes, fishing, exactly what they're doing. So with that all being said, the fact that he was on these substances when he was being violent, Cassie said herself on the stand that when he wasn't on the illegal substances, he was a totally different person. Like there was two puffs. Isn't that what she said? Isn't that what she said? And then other people say the same thing. So they're not giving him any wiggle room, in my opinion. And they keep saying what he hasn't proven. But you know what? They haven't proven any damn thing either. Okay? They have not proven anything. All they keep talking about is what we already know. That stuff was how many years ago? Now, albeit the instance with Jane Doe was recent, I think that was in 2024, right before his arrest, as they said, or sometime before. But most of the things they're bringing up are years old, years ago. And Tusi, ketamine, okay, ecstasy, MDMA, Molly, all that stuff was involved. GHB, all of these different things were involved. And who knows the effects of all of those different things compiled together in a cocktail if you take all of them or several of them over a period of time, you know, during the night or whatever. Who knows the effects of all of those illegal substances on one's brain? Okay? So anyway, Leo said this country always embracing violence against us. Yep. Absolute says unless they're saying their own rehab programs are useless, they have to consider them once completed. Yes. And then, like I told you guys, when I showed you the interview that Mark Agnifilo did days ago, he literally said they have counselors, more than one, counselors coming to the jail to visit with Diddy. Okay? Mark Jack said, when you're black, you can take it to trial and beat the case, and they still label you a criminal. They absolutely will. Let's not forget how they did Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was acquitted. Okay? They yelled to the mountaintop when he was accused. But when he was acquitted, they whispered in the wind. Okay, I want you all to pay attention. He was still demonized and villainized even years later, even in his death. Some people still think that he's a whole PDF file, even though the man was acquitted of any wrongdoing after a decades-long investigation by the feds and over 300 papers of documented evidence. It is what it is. Okay. Cool Kitty says, I don't condone his behavior regarding physical abuse, and he should get bail. And if he commits a crime and bail, then send his ass to jail for 20 years. Until that, he should get bail on bail. That's what I'm saying. If they're so sure that he's going to break the terms of his bail conditions, well, go ahead and give him bail and just sit back and wait. And as soon as he F's up, throw him back in the slammer. Okay? Because all this stuff they're saying is just assumptions and speculation. And quite frankly, them just putting 20 on 10. Okay? Embellishing and being all dramatic just to keep this man locked up. They're mad because they got an L. Okay? They took that L. But like I told you all, Mike Jeffries, he got bail. Okay? Like this is not making any sense. Hold on. I'm gonna look up one more thing and then I'm up out of here. Here's what Mike Jeffries was accused of. October of 2024, a month after Diddy was arrested. Okay. Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, along with two other men, Matthew Smith and James Jacobson, were charged in a federal indictment in New York with 1 count of S trafficking and 15 counts of interstate prostitution. 15 counts. The indictment alleges that Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson operated an international S trafficking and prostitution enterprise between approximately 2008 and 2015. The men claimed that the charges claim that the defendants used force, fraud, and coercion to traffic men and operate a prostitution business. They were accused of luring young men with the promises of modeling opportunities, coercing them into attending sex events under false pretenses, and subjecting them to non-consensual sex acts. It is important to note that Jeffries and his co-defendants have pleaded not guilty to these charges. It is also important. It has also been reported that Jeffries may be mentally unfit to stand trial due to an alleged diagnosis of late onset Alzheimer's dementia. I want y'all to pay attention. Now he's crazy. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Okay. That's what they're saying. So that's what he was charged with. Okay. That's what he was charged with. And he got bail, like I said. And Diddy didn't. And they didn't think this man was dangerous. He was released on a $10 million bail. I think it was like $10 million. Yeah, he got a $10 million bond in an international S trafficking case. International S trafficking case. Okay, y'all hear that? Mark Jackson, unbelievable. It absolutely is. We the people said Jeffrey's case sounds more like a RICO than Diddy. Yeah, exactly. They didn't charge him with a RICO because they don't want to take his assets, I'm sure. Okay, but they wanted to take Diddy's assets, honey. Anyway, I'm out of here, you guys. I have an appointment, Zoom meeting. So listen, I'll be back later. You can rest assured I'll be back later, okay, with some more trending topics and some more important information. I love you guys. I hope you all enjoy the broadcast. Please don't forget to like and share. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Be sure to click that notification bell and click the word all so you're notified each time the Queen Goddess goes live. All right? And this is all so crazy. Okay. Hey, Ray Johnson, beloved. Okay. So with that all being said, each one teach one. That's how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember, beloveds, to keep the Most High first in your lives.
Hit him with that flavor. All in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you're done. They show no love for the queen. Why you hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans? I got dreams like King Luther, shed blood like Kunsa. You ain't helping my people, I ain't got nothing to say to ya. I want all the smoke like hookah. Talking reparations, America won't be great until they give us compensation. I'm like, I'm the hottest right now. That's See right. A bunch of lames out here trying to jock on my style. They be doing too much. I'm the queen, it's too easy. It's like they all at Popeyes, how they be talking so greasy. I just sit back and laugh while these haters get madder. So nefarious how they don't want my pockets with cheddar. I tell them they can do better. These snakes in the grass can leave a bite on your ass, cause y'all be trusting too fast. I got my foot on the gas, other one on they necks. Dropping receipts on haters, you better show some respect. I'm never facing regrets, we only facing the threats. Running through every challenge like a relay, break no sweat. It's a cold game, so I got that blanket with me. Now that my people awaken, ain't no going to sleep. I do not play by my piece, this time I'm playing for keeps. You talking slick, but when I see you like them ends, we gon' meet. And I got gold all in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you done. They show no love for the queen. Why they hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans and I got gold all in my skin, God all in my blood, kings all in my circle. You touch one of mine and you done. They show no love for the queen. Why they hating on me? Is it cause I'm free and I got Malcolm X in my jeans and I got